why is MEV so interesting for Cosmos?
So there's a lot of reasons. The main one is, regardless of whether you're in a cross-chain or a single-chain world, when there is DeFi activity, there's going to be opportunities for MEV, and block space is valuable. And as the cross-chain ecosystem takes off, the block space in Cosmos will get more and more valuable, and this competition is going to get more extreme. But because Cosmos is cross-chain, there's also a lot of other exciting things that can happen, opportunities that emerge between different dexes on different chains that are very hard to capture right now. If there's not a way for folks to capture these cross-chain opportunities, it rewards essentially people who can keep massive amounts of liquidity on all these different chains at the same time to capture them. And if you see that happening, the folks who are going to make the most money off of MEV aren't going to be ordinary crypto users. They're going to be massive hedge funds and market makers and folks who can afford to take out many $million-dollar loans. And what Skip wants to do is to try to prevent that kind of centralized future by making it easier for people to capture those cross-chain opportunities.
With that said, Magnus, Barry, so happy to have you on the Cosmoverse YouTube channel today. I had you guys on the Friends YouTube channel like 2 weeks ago or so, and now it's even cooler to have you here on the on the Cosmoverse YouTube channel. Sorry, on the Cosmoverse YouTube channel. So, how are you doing, guys?
Good. We've been heads down building for a while now. Grown the team too, which is exciting, and actually just got office space in New York City. So
yeah.
Lots of fun things.
The team is twice as big as it was the last time we talked.
Oh, really? So how big was the team the last time and how big is it now?
It was just the two of us and one full-time contractor. And now we have one full-time employee and 2 more people on work trials who are about to convert to full-time. So we were 2, we're about to be 5.
Nice. So first of all, congratulations. And apparently MEV is booming. And the thing is now that many people, they hear the term MEV for the very first time. So today we want to, look at the topic of MEV from a very broad perspective. If you're interested in diving very deep into MEV, we can link some documentations and some videos in the description below. But for people who are very, very new to this topic, could you explain very briefly what MEV essentially is all about?
Yeah. So MEV traditionally stands for minor extractable value, but I think now is more maximal extractable value. And it basically refers to the ability of extracting some kind of profit from reordering transactions and inserting transactions and taking out transactions from an unconfirmed mempool, right? So because blockchains aren't instant, it's not like your transaction gets mined instantly. There's this state of time where your transactions exist in limbo. And during that time, other people can alter the order and alter basically their own transactions to extract some kind of revenue. It exists on every chain. In some capacity. And, the solutions that we've seen around it, the most effective ones we've seen are economic. So incentivizing people who are capturing MEV to play fairly and in a way that distributes that revenue back to stakers. Yeah.
I think the sort of 2 most important questions you can ask when it comes to MEV are, 1, how is a block formed? When you look at transactions that have been submitted to the chain before they're put into a block, how is it decided what goes into that block and where in the block do those transactions go? And then a second question, which isn't totally separate but is related, is, as Magnus said, MEV is sort of like the profit that you can create by organizing transactions in blocks, deciding what to include. Second question is, where does that profit go? Who accrues that profit? And different MEV solutions, different kinds of mempools, different chains answer these questions in different ways. And those are some of like the most fundamental differences between chains, really.
Yeah, and I think on that note, it's also important to briefly explain what a mempool is. So from a very broad perspective, just that you guys know, if you never heard the term mempool, so it's basically the pool where all the transactions can be found before they are getting validated. So validators and or miners on Ethereum nowadays, they can pick different transactions out of this mempool. So I think that's also very important to mention here if you're new to this topic. But now you mentioned that it's important who profits from MEV, so to say, because there's a lot of MEV out there. So how is the situation nowadays, and where do you guys come into play?
Yeah, so it might be helpful to think about like a concrete example, right? So let's say you're a Juno whale, right? And you submit a transaction to buy 1 million Juno. Obviously, that's going to move the price of Juno up, right? So if it's on an AMM, it's going to have some kind of slippage. I hope you set it high because that's going to move it heavily, right? Depending on the liquidity. So that's going to create an arbitrage opportunity, right? There's going to be other pools that have Juno that don't have that price because they weren't affected by that transaction. Therefore, someone can say, hey, I'll come in and right after your transaction, which hasn't gone through yet, it sits, waiting in the mempool. I want to execute a sell, and then I'll also execute a buy on a different place where it's cheaper. And therefore, they construct an arbitrage, right? And maybe that arbitrage, and this is not uncommon, is worth $100,000 of riskless free money. Right now, how Cosmos works is there's a speed game. So the first person to get there to execute and claim that opportunity will receive 100% of that money. And that's like a bot searcher or someone, outside of stakers. Post skip, what we do is we create an auction. So let's say one searcher comes in and says, hey, I want to capture that arbitrage. I'm willing to pay $10,000 in fees to capture it so that you give me that execution prioritization. But since there's an auction, someone else can say, well, it's riskless. I'll pay 20,000. It's no sweat off my back. And then you kick off an auction where we expect people to end up paying, 80, 90%. So let's say $80,000 to capture that $100,000 arbitrage. They still make 20,000, but then that $80,000 goes back to stakers. And also to the validator that was chosen to validate that block. So the validator takes its commission from that 80,000, and then they pass the rest off to their stakers as additional block rewards. And then if you look at like Ethereum, like when Flashbots was introduced, Flashbots and MEV is like accrued over $1 billion of additional revenue just from that same kind of structure on Ethereum. And has increased validator rewards for their stakers by, well, in that case, it's miners, but the equivalent would be validators for us by, anywhere between 30 to 70%. So it's significant.
And I think another important thing that comes out of Magnus's answer there is that how you structure, the process that creates the block, whether it's an auction, whether it's speed base, affects user experience significantly. So in the case where Cosmos is today, where all of these searchers are just spamming transactions, there's few major consequences. First one is network congestion, right? So you have a ton more transactions that the validators are processing, which puts more load on them, puts more load on the network, and introduces various chain halt risks. Another one, which is really important, is block space gets wasted. So if you look at Osmosis or a similar DEX, a really large number of the transactions there are just failed arbitrage opportunities where a bunch of searchers at the same time have showed up and said, oh, I really want to win this transaction. They submit their transaction racing to be first. Only one of them gets it. And then there's a graveyard of failed transactions after them. We saw this a lot on Terra very early on. And during the Terra depeg, it created massive problems for the user experience there. So people, for example, who saw that the UST price was crashing and wanted to get their money out of Anchor literally couldn't do it because the network was so congested with people running arbitrage and liquidation bots that a normal person had no way of being like, hey, it's really important to me to repay the loan right now so I don't get liquidated. You had a lot of people lose money that way. And I think an important thing to know about MEV2 is it's very taily, right? So in most of the time, there's very little profit that can be made off of reorganizing any particular block or deciding what gets included. But in moments of crisis, there's a lot of money that can be made. And that's when these user experience problems get worse and have the potential to really affect chains. And so that's sort of why we're excited to be building it now in the bear, where there's relatively little volume and where token prices are down, because it gives us a chance to get everything in place for the next time we have one of these major events.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here, and just to repeat everything. So as far as I understood it right, so the situation with MEV is that it's a very complex topic, and it's not very accessible for the average user, so to say. So you have to be like someone who is like who has like a big background in tech, for example, who has a lot of knowledge. And for the average user, it's pretty much inaccessible. MEV can also emerge in extraordinary market situations and also can lead to decreasing the quality of the user experience. And you guys are trying to solve this problem so that MEV generally becomes more user-friendly, so to say, and more accessible for the average user, correct?
Yeah, basically. So if you think about it this way, like when an MEV opportunity is created, who's creating the opportunity? It's the user, right? Someone's just using the chain. They're executing trades, they're swapping tokens, they're doing, what a chain should enable them to do. Now, if someone comes on and takes advantage of that opportunity and makes a lot of money off of that person, where should that money go? Like, should it go just to that person, or should it be distributed back to the chain and to the protocol, to the user that created it? Our basic idea is it should be the second one. It should, like, that revenue should go back to the protocol. And there's many ways of going around about that. And the solution we have is, sort of test it, because it's similar to Flashbots. And then to answer your question about user experience, like as Barry was saying, when everyone's like competing for these opportunities on chain, you have a ton of spam. So just like waves of spam of people trying to find these opportunities and capture them. We take that off chain. We allow them to compete off chain, pick the winners, and then just send the winners along. So now instead of having 1,000 transactions, you have one winner, right? So you take all of that load outside of the blocks and the mempool.
Yeah, I think this is like very important here to clarify, and and it also offers us a very good view on it. But now in the context of Cosmos, so we live in a Christian world, we as cosmonauts. So you mentioned so in other ecosystems, so MEV also, so the amount of MEV that can be generated also depends on the underlying network. And most of the MEV emerges in the Ethereum ecosystem nowadays, which is like pretty logical because Ethereum is the largest DeFi ecosystem as of now. So why should we care about this in a cross-chain world that is, from like architecture-wise, completely different to Ethereum? Why is MEV so interesting for Cosmos?
Yeah, so there's a lot of reasons. The main one is regardless of whether you're in a cross-chain or a single-chain world, when there is DeFi activity and you're creating blocks and someone is deciding how transactions in those blocks get ordered or what transactions get included or don't get included, and that's the role of the validators, there's going to be opportunities for MEV. So you see a lot of that today in Osmosis. You saw a lot of that on Terra. As other Cosmos dexes come online, you'll see it there. As Mars and other loan marketplaces come online, there's going to be similar opportunities around liquidation. So it's not really a question of like something that's inherent to the tech stack so much as it is just the fact that people are trading financial assets and block space is valuable. And as the cross-chain ecosystem takes off, the block space in Cosmos will get more and more valuable, and this competition is going to get more extreme. So back in the days of Ethereum, before you had a skip-like product, Flashbots, what was happening is they had auctions in their mempools. So if you paid the most for gas, you would get at the top of the block, and searchers, people capturing MEV opportunities, would just bid that up with more and more transactions. And then normal users couldn't get their transactions in. They simply couldn't afford to. You don't have that in Cosmos yet today because the ecosystem is still growing. But if there isn't a solution like Skip to provide auctions and to provide privacy, you also won't, you will have those same negative consequences, regardless of the fact that it's cross-chain. But because Cosmos is cross-chain, there's also a lot of other exciting things that can happen, opportunities that emerge between different dexes on different chains that are very hard to capture right now. For example, if Juno is priced one way on Osmosis and a different way on Juno Swap, there is an arbitrage opportunity there, right? And as Injective comes online and Say comes online and Crescent gets bigger and all of these things happen, those opportunities are going to grow. They're going to get a lot bigger, especially as chains like Osmosis work to try to internalize some of this as protocol revenue. Then single chain opportunities are maybe going to get smaller eventually, but these cross chain opportunities are going to grow. And it presents like a real destabilization risk if there's not a good way to handle them, because you're going to get cross chain waves of spam. And the other thing you're going to see is major centralization. So if there's not a way for folks to capture these cross-chain opportunities, it rewards essentially people who can keep massive amounts of liquidity on all these different chains at the same time to capture them. And if you see that happening, the folks who are going to make the most money off of MEV aren't going to be ordinary crypto users or validators or even small MEV shops. They're going to be massive hedge funds and market makers and folks who can afford to take out many $million-dollar loans. And what Skip wants to do is to try to prevent that kind of centralized future by making it easier for people to capture those cross-chain opportunities as well and make it more financially sustainable. Like imagine if you could, instead of having to take out liquidity on all of these different chains at the same time and manage it, imagine if you could take out a flash loan on one chain, bridge it to another chain, run your arbitrage there and bridge it back all atomically. So you know that if your arbitrage succeeds, you're going to be able to repay the flash loan. And if you don't, you're not on the hook for anything. That's simply not possible today. And that's something that we're trying to enable in the long term.
Yeah, I think this is like an essential part of this discussion: the danger of centralization, and also the danger that basically just the strongest in the network will be able to profit from MEV if we reach a certain stage, so to say. But we talked also about why MEV is so interesting in the Cosmos environment. And one reason is IBC, obviously, because otherwise this cross-chain world would not be here. And maybe, Magnus, you know in which direction I want to head, because during our last interview on Friends, you brought up a very interesting thesis to the table, where you mentioned that MEV could also be one of the reasons why IBC as a technology could become somewhat profitable. Could you maybe repeat this once again in some simple words?
Yeah, sure. So going back to Barry's point a little bit, so like let's say you're a searcher, right? So you're looking for MEV opportunities, and you see that the price of Juno on chain A and the price of synthetic Juno on, let's say, Osmosis is different, right? So it's like, I want to buy the cheap one, I want to sell the high one, right? Except all of your liquidity is on, let's say, the Cosmos hub, right? So you don't have the liquidity there in order to basically execute those swaps. And also the opportunity is fleeting, right? So someone's going to capture it and you want to be as fast as possible to execute that. One idea, so normally what you do is you do your IBC transactions, you send liquidity over to chain A, then you send some liquidity over to chain B, maybe then you do a swap into the asset that you need, and then you use that liquidity to execute the transaction. But that takes a lot of time, right? So IBC transactions can be slow because they take the lower bound of the block times of all the different chains that are involved. One idea that I think is really relevant is you can potentially provide that liquidity sooner, right? So like, let's say you have someone who says, hey, I'm transferring the liquidity. I want it now, but I know that it's going to take some time, but it will come. So like, if you can offer it to me now, I'll promise I'll pay you once the transfer goes through, right? And then maybe you pay a little fee for that instant liquidity. And then I think one really interesting thing is, in order to solve that process, which is essential for cross-chain MEV to have liquidity there instantly, you can pay the relayer, right? So like the relayer can basically act as both the person transmitting the funds and then also the person providing the loan, which is backed by their own IBC transaction. So they're like, okay, I'll give you the money now where you're going. And I already see that you started an IBC transaction. I trust that because I'm the relayer, I'm running it. I know it's going to go through. So just give me a fee, which is like relayer incentivization. And here's the cash now on the chain that you want to go to. And then you can execute things instantly, right? You could have a cross-chain transfer that's instant. So if I want to go from Juno on Osmosis Juno on Juno to Juno on Osmosis, it could just be instant. The other thing I think that's really interesting is with interchain accounts, right? So we believe like interchain accounts is going to be one of the most fundamental changes in Cosmos that is going to be like totally change the name of the game. It allows for such incredible cross-chain composability, meaning you can create so much more strategy and so many different kinds of transactions that we haven't really seen on any other place. That's unique to Cosmos and probably the best use of IBC we've seen. But what will be interesting is, let's say you're going back to the Juno whale example, right? So let's say you're the relayer that's moving over this interchain account swap for 1 million Juno. You know when, because you can see the packet, you know what it's going to do. And you know that it's going to be a huge MEV opportunity. And so the opportunity arises as the relayer, you can say, okay, can I bundle like my own transaction afterwards to capture that MEV opportunity? Or if I don't want to do it, can I offer it to someone else in a similar auction format, right? Can I say, hey, I'm carrying this giant transaction, it's about to hit. Does anyone want to back run it, right? Or does anyone want to basically use it in their own MEV strategy? Let's start an auction and then I'll give it to the highest bidder or something like that, or something related to that. And our general idea is like, because relayers sit in such an important place for cross-chain MEV, they're going to be able to have the power to capture that. And, like right now, there isn't really a good incentivization layer for IBC relayers. I mean, they have to pay the fees, which is crazy. And also, like, I think charging fees is not going to be, is not the ideal user experience. So if there's a different way to do it, I think we're chatting with the core teams behind them, and we'd love to pursue that.
Yeah, I think what I found so fascinating about all of this, what you just mentioned, is how MEV can bring profitability to all kinds of places within the Cosmos ecosystem, even to places where we didn't expect that we could somewhat profit from, for example, arbitrage opportunities that evolve. So I think this is like super, super interesting. And I think this will be like one of the big topics to talk about, especially in 2023, if you guys are also a project on a like more developed stage, so to say. But speaking about this, so you're a very young project. I think we can say this like it. And now you decided to come to Cosmoverse. So would be like super interesting to know how you heard from Cosmoverse, and also why you decided to go to Cosmoverse this year.
Yeah. For us, from the very beginning, what we felt is that Cosmos as an ecosystem really needs its own dedicated ecosystem aligned MEV provider, that it shouldn't be somebody else like another provider coming in and imposing a system that existed and was created and optimized for another ecosystem. It really needs to belong to the users and be designed as a product from the ground up with Cosmos in mind from the beginning. And so for us, this whole process has been about getting to know validators, getting to know protocol core teams, getting to know Cosmos users as we go deeper. And as we did that, everybody's talking about Cosmoverse. Everybody's very excited to go. We had a lot of validators asking to meet us at EthCC and some of the other previous events. And we're like, well, it's like not really a Cosmos event. We're focused on hiring. We're focused on building. We can't really take a few days yet to go to a conference just to hang out. And then Cosmoverse is happening, right? And it's like the ecosystem conference for Cosmos. So for us, it was perfect. It was like, okay, we'll go. We'll finally be able to meet everyone in person and actually like have proper face-to-face conversations about MEV. That's the other thing. Like, this is a very difficult, complex, touchy subject. You can't really like cover all of it in just a video call, and it often helps to connect with people live in person. So for us, it's a no-brainer going, and it's a no-brainer sponsoring, honestly. And we're super excited to be able to like kind of have our debut there.
Yeah, and we are very excited to have you on board, guys. And thanks for the nice words. And if I'm now a normal attendee, I just bought my ticket. What can I expect from Skip this year? So will you announce something? What are you guys planning on the ground? So maybe, Magnus, you can talk a little bit about this.
Yeah, in terms of announcements, I think we will be able to announce something by the advent of Cosmoverse. So that's in a month or so time. Our product roadmap is basically get to our own private testnet, which we're creating, and actually we might open source that tooling, which I think is going to be very useful. Then get to the testnets of the chains that we're running on within a 2 to 3 month time frame, and then get to mainnet within, I would want to say, 6 to 8 months. We are trying to accelerate that as fast as possible. For reference, it took Flashbots about a year to get to mainnet. It took staking Jito, it looks like a little more than a year, but they have a very complicated problem to solve, so I don't blame them on Solana. So we want to try to accelerate that as much as possible. We have a chat with all the validators to sort of give them updates in terms of how we progress. And hopefully we can get some deliverable out before Cosmoverse. And then there will be actually one slightly different thing that we are going to be shipping to the entire community of all Cosmos users, which will probably be basically, I don't want to say exactly what it is, but basically will provide a lot more understanding of what we're trying to build and the problem that we'll solve. And I think will be very exciting for people to look at. But that's actually almost finished, and that will probably be coming out on an even sooner time frame.
Yeah, this sounds. Oh, sorry. Go on.
I was just mad. The other thing is, while we're there, we're going to be trying to meet as many new validators as possible. Some validators have side events. We basically just want to sit down with anyone who wants to talk about MEV or is wondering like how they can potentially participate in the Skip market, either as a searcher or as a validator, and give them an introduction. So if there are folks who are going, who haven't met us but want to meet us, we have a contact page on our website. We can schedule an in-person chat then, or potentially show up to an event that you guys are hosting on the side. Just wanted to put that out there as well. Our schedule.
Yeah, and we can also link that in the description below. So if you guys are interested, please feel free to reach out. But what I also find, what I would be like very interested to know is, so we will host Cosmoverse this year in Colombia, in Medellin, to be precise. So how do you observe the Colombian developer market? How do you observe Colombia generally as a location? So what were your thoughts when you heard, okay, the next Cosmoverse will take place in Medellin, Colombia?
That's an interesting question. We've sort of had our heads down, so we haven't thought too deeply about it. I mean, we're generally big proponents of crypto becoming a de facto alternative to the traditional financial ecosystem. We come from that world, right? I worked at Bridgewater, Barry worked at D. Shaw, both massive hedge funds. And I think, who that's going to benefit most is probably companies with destabilized currencies. And provide an alternative for them. And part of paving the way for that is building better infrastructure around, making these marketplaces and DEXs and decentralized financial institutions more safe, and preventing things like front running and sandwiching and all the things that basically could take advantage of those people. And so even though it's not, we're not directly building for that, I think it is relevant. Part of what we're trying to do is build the infrastructure so that DeFi operates better, and that the rewards of DeFi that are inherent in the ecosystem goes back to the people who are actually participating. Like imagine a world where in traditional finance, like all the high frequency traders had to return the funds, or at least had to compete for those funds, and the proceeds of that would go back to like traders themselves. It would be a significant amount of funds, and because we have this open ecosystem, we actually have the ability to build that into DeFi, which I think is super cool.
We also, in terms of Colombia, we've been trying to hire mostly in New York so far, but we have a couple folks on the team so far who are remote and fantastic, and we're always open to hiring more people who are remote, who might be based in Colombia, especially because the time zone is the same. So I think we're super excited to meet Colombian devs who are already in the Cosmos ecosystem and who know it well and who can maybe help us with some of our Tendermint work as well.
Yeah, and we also have a hackathon a couple of days after Cosmoverse, so we will have a lot of devs there. There are also like some workshops, so hope that you guys can meet new talents on the ground. But yeah, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about MEV and also to share your thoughts with us about Colombia. And yeah, very happy that we have you on the ground on September 26th, 27th, and 28th. 2022. And yeah, with that being said, hasta luego in Medellin.